Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and people. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Well, everyone's a special guest, but especially special to me. I'm joined by my father-in-law. Now, if you've been a listener to the podcast, he's been on here 2 times. I'm going to put on those episodes in the show notes about his, world of work and working in nonprofit and all that stuff and the meaningful work. But we're going to have a special topic today. But before we get into it, Jeff, you want to give listeners a little bit of a bio of who you are?
Well, I'm now a relatively older person. I'm just turned 73. I have 2 daughters, one of whom is married to Philip, and I'm retired from a life in the nonprofit advocacy world, and I guess one of the more important aspects of my life now is that I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. So that's not good, but I'm doing okay, and I'm here to talk with you and Philip about what's going on in our lives.
So, the listeners, I share a lot on social media, surprise, surprise. But I think we already hit our year anniversary in our new home. And so for those that don't know or haven't followed along, we live together. So let's just go back in, the timeline of how do we come to the situation of living together?
Well, I got diagnosed with this cancer almost a year and a half ago. And it was kind of out of the blue. I had no symptoms. I had no indications that I was sick. At the colonoscopies I had, did not show any of the cancer. So it was quite a surprise, and it took my wife and me and my family by surprise. So I decided that one of the important things to do was to try to make sure that I got things settled in my life as much as possible while I was still healthy. I had no idea, nor did the doctors, about how quickly my cancer would affect my ability, my health, and my ability to make judgments or to be active. So I figured, I should, as quickly as possible, make plans to about my future and my wife's future especially, but also my family. So my first priority was to get my wife Joan settled and to make sure that there was no issue about what happened to Mom when Dad is sick or Dad is gone. And I didn't want Joan saying I don't want to be a burden to anybody. I didn't want the kids say, "Oh, Mom, come live with me," but then not have any space for her really to live with them. So I suggested to Philip and Maggie, his wife, that we something that we actually had talked about, but kind of didn't take very seriously, about the idea of moving in together. And the attraction there was that we'd be able to get kind of a bigger new house by combining our 2 houses into one. We would be able to be of help with living, cooking and shopping and taking care of the kids and doing all that. If and when we needed care from Maggie especially, figuring out Philip wouldn't be all that helpful. We would be there. Maggie wouldn't have to travel, 30, 40 minutes to wherever Joan was to check in on her and to be helpful, that we would be there. And it'd be easier to take care of us. There's those kind of trade-offs in terms of, it wasn't all, sweet creams and, daffodils for the kids to have us living with them. And nor was it, totally great for us to be around the kids and have all the noise and all the, combustion of, 4 and 7-year-old in our family. But on balance, it seemed like a good trade-off. So I pitched that to my family. Everybody seemed to agree. And very quickly, we moved on getting our houses ready for sale. Maggie and I especially started looking both online and on weekends, open houses, at various, what kind of house do we need, what kind of size house we need. And we quickly moved to, we found a house that we thought could allow us to carve off a wing for Joan and me, while being big enough for the rest of the family. We sold our houses relatively quickly. I mean, all within several months, and bought this brand new house out in Fairfax, which it's a Fairfax address, but it feels like it's in the middle of the country, and it's because we sold 2 houses at a profit, we bought this grand house, and we have a lot of space, and it's a big house. We have a pool, and it's very comfy. And that's our living arrangement for the last year. And it seems to be working fairly well. So that's kind of how we got to where we are.
So, growing up, did you ever have this as a model? Because, I think for me, I saw a couple examples of grandparents moving back in and not, but it wasn't just like, I don't know, I guess in my family unit or culture that we saw this. But growing up, did you see this model of intergenerational living, up where you were growing up in Jersey?
Not really. We had a situation where I grew up in an apartment in New Jersey, and it was garden apartments kind of built right after World War II to have all the soldiers coming back, have places to live. And so it was garden apartments, 2 stories and, kind of spread out. And so we had my grandparents living across from us. So I had a lot of interaction with them, but it wasn't like we were taking care of them; they were taking care of us. But I'd go there for lunch, during school, and I would spend some nights there, and my grandparents would take care of me. So I had that experience, but nothing where we lived together. No.
So, dialing it back, when you had this idea to move in together, I know you have a lot of friends, particularly your peers. What was some of their feedback when you told them they were doing this? Did you listen to their feedback, or was your mind set that you wanted to do this regardless, for that?
I was set on it. My feeling was, my big motivation, as I said, was to get Joan, my wife, settled. And in a place that she had ownership of. And we shared ownership. So we worked all the finances out very carefully. We had a trust. We did everything, with lawyers to help us make sure that was all worked out financially. And we also were very conscious. We have a daughter who lives in New York, and we wanted to make sure that everything we did was transparent, and that she had her financial interests protected as we did all this stuff at the house. So I did talk to all my friends about it, and everybody was generally encouraging, but I was determined that we were going to do this. And I don't remember how enthusiastic you were, Philip, but Maggie seemed to be enthusiastic. We never were quite sure, but I think we were all conscious, you all more than I, that this was trade-offs. You were getting us with all our beauty, even though I had this diagnosis of cancer, and and Joan is healthy, and she could live another 20 years. But it was all, you were going to get this grand house that was, helped with the trade-off, And I think that we were all good about it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you did explain it that we did revisit this. This was, a lot of time in the making. This was not a rash decision. We had thought about this very actively about 5 years ago. And I will say transparently, I was very adamant about a no. But I think in a different phase, we talked about this earlier, that I was more settled in my career. I think I was more settled in who I was as a person, that I did not, I was more on board. I think I didn't really was as apprehensive this go round. Can you speak to that? Because I will say to me, while we talked about this, about the man of the house role and, normal system, and now we have a new system. Did you think about that? Like, okay, I have a young man, me, who's the head honcho or whatever. I don't know, patriarchal thing.
You mean after your wife being the head honcho?
Yeah, that's true.
So that was an issue. I am generally a take charge person, and I was careful about that. Part of it is Maggie is pretty take charge herself, and she's very commonsensical and down to earth, and she's good at this stuff. Even though she has a pretty full plate, my plate wasn't very full, so I did take responsibility for the problems with the house and dealing with the house and all those issues. And I did it in a way that we consulted on everything. We periodically met as a group about things. You, Philip, generally didn't feel strongly about most everything, and so you would just, if it sounded good to you, would just go along with it. And it was, we had a bunch of decisions to make about how to spend money. We decided to try to split all the, split all the costs. That was an issue. So there were some things that you didn't want to spend money on that we were willing to spend money on, or vice versa. But, it took some time. I think mainly it took a time for you to feel comfortable in the fact that we have this new arrangement. We didn't know how long I'd be around, but, and Joan is not a take charge person, my wife. So, ultimately it would be you and Maggie running the show in however you two work these things out. And I think you recognized that would be the long-term, way things got done. I didn't know how long I'd be around. We were always planning for me not to be around at some point, even though we didn't like to talk about it. So I think I tried to be very open and transparent about it. But, frankly, in terms of being the man of the house, you were pretty flexible in terms of things, and you, at least at the stage of all the things that had to be taken care of in the house, you were happy for me to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think, there's a new system. And I think one of the things that I found in this system is finding your lane and your role, like kind of like we were a tribe. And, I definitely don't have strong opinions about aesthetics or looks, but I definitely wanted to be responsible for things, or, stay in my lane, which is like helping with the boys and things like that. And I would give you a lot of praise that you valued that, like that you like you made me feel good that I had a role. So I would take it on, but I didn't feel like I needed to be the head honcho to have that role,
Right. When, we have a homeowners association here, like in most places, and you took the lead on that. And where there were ways for you to, to take charge, you did. But I handled a lot of the, fixing things and, getting, vendors to do different things and, things that I could do because, I had probably more experience than you doing it. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I wasn't working. I had time. Mm-hmm. So I think we worked that stuff out pretty well.
Now, so for those that are interested, I like to use this podcast as ways to teach people things. So for those that are listening that are interested or going into this situation, what are some things that you think needs to be talked about? some tips or some things like that for families that think, hey, we need to move in or have people move in, multiple families and things like that?
Well, I would say, and you should, comment on these things too, but I think the first thing is that the adults have to get along. There's no substitute for that. If you don't really like each other, or there are issues, you behind your mother-in-law's back, you're kind of cursing her because she's a pain in the neck, that won't work very well. There may be other, cases where everybody's sick and you need to do it. But, if you're doing this voluntarily, then you need to make sure you all get along and that you're able to talk about things frankly and openly. That was something we never had a problem doing. In my family, the girls and Joan and I always talked about things. That wasn't the case in your family, but we all, you with us, always talked very openly about things. So that's the first thing. If that criterion isn't met, then you should be real careful about doing it. Secondly, you have to talk real frankly about money, and how money gets spent, how money gets saved, who owns what. All those kinds of things have to be talked about, and you have to get help in figuring out ownership of the house and make sure that that is clear both legally and in everybody's mind. And if you have siblings, like Maggie does, then you have to figure out how do you protect the sibling if you're going into a financial relationship with another sibling. So I think those are the two big things. The last thing is just roles in the house and making sure that nobody feels that they're left out from decisions, and some way of making sure that there's some way of checking in on decisions. So we talk about things, but we also exchange a lot of emails and texts about, look, I think we need to spend money on this. How do you feel about it? And then if everybody agrees, it's easy. If not, we talk about it. So there has to be some way of having communications about, so no one feels that any one person is making decisions without everybody being consulted.
I was thinking, I think the two things I'd like to add is, I guess we have another layers. We have kids, so I think we need to be on the same page about discipline. I think the first couple days, if we say no to something and then he goes to me, Miles goes to Mimi, we told him no milk or whatever. So I guess parenting needs to be one of those not one of those open conversations, grandparenting, parenting. And I think the one thing I would like to add that has been really helpful is the value of space. You made sure that when we bought this house that you had space to yourselves. You and Joan had space to yourselves. There's a lot of space. There's a place for me to hide, the house of alpha. But I think the discussion or the value or respect of space, I think, should be very important in living together.
Yeah, not a small thing. So, it depends on what you can afford, obviously. And, we put two houses together, so it enabled us to afford to get into the house. It didn't solve our problems of managing the house once we're in it, but it did enable us to get into the house. So space is important, and what you can afford is important. And, you have to be obviously very careful about that. But we were able to, look at a place where we could carve off our wing, and you take our wing off without much construction. We had to do a little bit, but you carve off our wing and you don't even notice the absence because the rest of the house is big enough that they have Philip and his family have plenty of room. So that's just a lucky feature of that. And you should, just be conscious, as Philip said, be conscious of space considerations so you're not on top of each other, because that's difficult. The issue of discipline is also important. What Joan and I decided ultimately with Philip and Maggie was that we just simply don't do any discipline. If there's an issue, we just stay out of it, and we often will walk away and walk into our wing and ignore what's going on so that they can deal with it. So every once in a while I'll get, I'll get, somebody will do something. I say, will you just stop that? Without thinking about it. But generally we keep to ourselves, we don't say much, and we leave whenever there's an issue.
Yeah, get your own space. So, what are some of the, on your end, I want to hear this more, your perspective. What are the benefits for you? Like, what are the things, like, as you wake up and live in this house with us as your children and your grandchildren, what are some things that you wake up and you just really think, well, this is what I envision our like?
Well, there are many days when I will come out and the kids will greet me in a warm way with a hug or just hi or whatever, and that's worth a lot. So I would, in our old life, I was seeing the kids maybe once a week, when they come over on the weekend or whatever, maybe sometimes during the week, but generally once a week. Now I see the kids all the time, and the grandkids, and that is great. I think one of the biggest things for me as a parent is seeing my daughter. I mean, nothing, no slight to Philip, but seeing my daughter is great. If I could also see Katie, my other daughter, once a day, that'd be terrific too. But being able to see Maggie every day is a treat, and that's another thing. Secondly, I'm now needing a little bit of help because of my cancer treatment, and so Maggie and Philip help out with that. Whether or not, whatever it is, getting me something or helping me get to the doctors or whatever, So that's a good thing. So I think those are the benefits to us really. Plus we have a lovely space, and the house is lovely, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would just say one benefit for me in this sense is that as I've looked at this whole year, I think the benefit I've gotten besides the space is just in-ground mentorship. You have given me a lot of career advice, a lot of just father life advice, just by just being you. And organically, watching it, I could see it without words, how you treat your kids and the thoughts that you think about the future, but also the thoughtful parts when we actually wake up and talk. And I feel like I joke, but I have like an editor-in-chief, like all the things I get to, if I'm trying to write something, you're really good at, reading what I write and stuff. So I think I've gotten a lot of, in a sense, wisdom. And I think that's one thing that I didn't expect. I thought more like it was just, you're going to tell me what to do and all that stuff, right? Like that's what I thought. But I didn't realize on the real caveat, it wasn't just, it was more so guidance and mentorship.
Yeah, that's been a treat for me too. We both wake up sometimes 6 o'clock in the morning. We sit outside and we talk for 45 minutes before the kids are awake or before Maggie bugs you about doing something. That's been unexpected. I didn't expect that either. That's been an unexpected treat.
Yeah, that's unexpected. So I think I think that this is good. We're going to try to keep it to 30 minutes. I think some of the listeners, they fill out a survey and they think that the podcast could be 30 minutes. So before this, let's do our shot for shot. You know what that is, part of the segment where you get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you one. You want to go first? I go first.
Well, are you feeling good about our new arrangement?
Yeah, I literally say I won. Got the big piece of the pie. As I said earlier, I understand we had a very thoughtful conversation, Maggie and I, that this wouldn't have worked 5 years ago. And I think the multitude of it was just the stars were aligned minus, your cancer. If I could trade that, I would take that back and we live in our separate houses easily. But, definitely being more sure of myself. We were thinking about it 5 years ago. I wasn't a parent, or we were just about to be parents. Right? Or no, or we just had Bennett. I wasn't at Mason and wasn't sure in my career and who I was. I wasn't an alpha and have like this extension of, new friends and new support. So I don't think mentally I was in a space to really be good at living in this situation 5 years ago. But now, who I am now, yes, it's been honestly more of a blessing than a hardship. I would say like 95. I'll give it a solid 95 good and 5% a headache.
I'll take that.
Yeah, it's still an A.
I don't know. Without the cancer diagnosis, we wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
But I think that even without the cancer diagnosis, now in hindsight, I think this could work very well. I think this still could work. I'm not sure we would have done it, but I don't think we need the cancer to make this work. And I think we still could have, achieved most of what we've achieved and still be happy with it.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like the other day, let's say you didn't have cancer, maybe you wouldn't have been in a rush to do it, but I could see us like, 5 years or 10 years down the line, if you were just getting older, just straight up older and wanted to downsize, I think that we could have made this work in my mind. If you just wanted to still set up the scene, because of, I think one thing that also perfect storm about this was that we spent a lot of time together during COVID, which kind of modeled for us that we can make it work, just being around, like you were our bubble. We broke bubble and we wanted to see you. So we saw each other, I think, more frequency during COVID than pre-COVID.
No, it was still about once a week, though, and it still was not all that much.
I felt like it was more.
Maybe,
I guess so.
Maybe.
I mean, I think it was almost, but I think more frequently weekends, like we didn't skip weekends or something. I don't know. But I felt like that time during COVID was also like a prototype that showed us that we could do it. I think that full year of COVID and then moving in 21, it was all the pieces that make this work, but I think it could have worked. All right, so my question for you, thinking about legacy, do you ever think about like, while we're living together, imparting your legacy, like this was a great opportunity to pass that on to the boys or whatever?
Well, I think about, as I said, spending more time with my daughter, that was great. And, Katie our other daughter gets to visit and feel part of the family. But I do think about having more memories with our two grandsons than I would have otherwise had. I'm not sure they're all the best memories, but there's more. They will think about this, as they get older. They'll remember. Mm-hmm. Even the 4-year-old will remember that Mimi and Baba lived with them, and I don't know how long Mimi will live after I do, but this is a positive memory for them. And I think it's also a chance for us to get to know each other better, and that matters to me. And hopefully, you'll feel, you'll feel good about that over time.
Yeah. No way out. You're stuck. We're all stuck together on paper.
So and it's my third podcast.
Yeah, it's your third podcast, which I'll put the other 2 in the show notes. So I think this was kind of a great conversation. I think if we have any follow up. How would you want we call it shout outs and plugs. So shout outs would be anything, showing love to anyone you want to show love to, shout outs basically. And then ways, if you are comfortable with the listeners following up with you, how would you want them to do that? But shout outs and plugs.
Well, if you want to talk more about that, I think get in touch with Philip, and Philip can figure out how we can talk about that. Mm-hmm. I think the shout out, it would be to Katie mostly, because our other daughter has had to adjust to this. It's been, I think, hard for her in some ways. I'm just guessing, hard for her because I'm now spending all this time with her sister and with their sons as opposed to her son. So I think Katie's had one of the biggest adjustments here, and she's been terrific. And I hope she feels that we're thinking about her all the time, and she's in our thoughts, and we understand that how this might be hard for her, but we appreciate all her support and love.
Yeah, shout out to Hermana. Katie has been, like I said, I didn't just gain a family of just in-laws. I gained a new sister when I married Maggie. So I actually kind of joked that I got the better end of the deal on that too, of people to bring me into their world, especially you and Maggie and Joan and Katie and Nick and all them, but also just your extended friends too. You have very extensive friends that feel like family. So listeners of the podcast, thank you so much. If you want to, follow up or learn more about generational living, feel free to contact me. I'm going to put in the show notes the 2 other episodes that Jeff did, as well as our Clifton Living magazine, kind of stunt. So if you want to read a little bit about us, I'll put that in the show notes. And Positive Philter, I want to hear from you. So I put an audience survey in the link. So if you have any feedback for the podcast, please put it in that audience survey. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your input and what you think would be a way to make this podcast a little bit better. I'm always open to improvement. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. If you want to leave a voicemail for the podcast, it's 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Spreading positivity is a movement, and thank you very much. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity a Movement. Thanks for listening.